The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan remains one of the most haunting mysteries in Canadian true crime history. A case that has baffled investigators, tormented family members, and captivated the public's imagination for years. On an otherwise quiet day in Nova Scotia, a seemingly ordinary family outing turned into an unthinkable tragedy that has yet to be solved. The story of Lilly and Jack Sullivan is more than just a missing persons case. It is a labyrinth of unanswered questions, conflicting timelines, and eerie circumstances that have fueled speculation ever since they vanished. To understand the weight of this mystery, we must begin with who they were, what their lives looked like before their disappearance, and the strange details that marked the final hours before they were last seen. Lilly Sullivan was a bright, outgoing young woman, described by her friends as someone who always carried an infectious laugh and an air of confidence wherever she went. At just 24 years old, she had her whole life in front of her. Raised in a tight-knit family in Nova Scotia, she had pursued studies in early childhood education and was working part-time at a daycare. Her bond with her younger brother Jack was especially strong. Jack, only 17, was a quiet, thoughtful teenager who often preferred reading and sketching to social gatherings. He was known at school for his reserved personality, but also for his keen sense of humor that only those closest to him ever really saw. The siblings, though different in temperament, shared an unshakable closeness. They often went on drives together, visited family friends, or spent time exploring the coastal trails near their home. On the morning of their disappearance, November 12, 2020, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Lilly had plans later in the day to meet with a friend, while Jack had mentioned wanting to work on an art project. According to their mother, the two decided to take Lilly's car for a drive, perhaps to pick up some groceries and spend a little time together before the evening. Their departure from the family home in the small community outside Halifax seemed routine, and no one could have predicted the strange events that would follow. By late afternoon, however, concern began to grow. Lilly never showed up for her meeting, and Jack did not return home. Their mother, who initially assumed they had lost track of time, began calling Lilly's cell phone. The calls went unanswered. After repeated attempts, worry set in, and by that evening, family members were frantically reaching out to friends and neighbors to see if anyone had spotted the siblings. When no leads surfaced, a missing persons report was filed with local authorities. The early stages of the investigation painted a troubling picture. Police quickly confirmed that Lilly's car, a gray Honda Civic, was missing along with the siblings. For a while, it seemed as if the vehicle itself might hold the first clue. Days later, however, the car was found abandoned near a wooded area not far from a popular hiking trail. Strangely, the vehicle was locked, and there were no immediate signs of struggle or forced entry. Inside the car, Lilly's purse and Jack's backpack were still present, containing personal items they almost certainly would not have left behind voluntarily. But both their phones were missing. Investigators determined that the last known signal from Lilly's phone had been picked up near the location where the car was discovered, sometime in the early afternoon on the day they went missing. Jack's phone, however, had been switched off entirely. Search efforts began immediately, with police, volunteers, and canine units combing the forested area and surrounding trails. Helicopters scanned from above, and divers checked nearby bodies of water. The community rallied together, with flyers and social media campaigns spreading awareness across the province and even into neighboring regions. Yet, despite the intensity of the search, not a single trace of Lilly or Jack was found. No clothing, no footprints leading away from the car, no personal belongings scattered in the woods, nothing. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. Investigators turned to the family, as is customary in missing persons cases, to piece together a clearer picture of the siblings' lives and any potential reasons for their disappearance. But those closest to them insisted there was no reason for Lilly or Jack to leave voluntarily. Lilly had been excited about a new job opportunity and was making plans with friends for the upcoming holidays. Jack had been looking forward to finishing school and had even begun researching colleges. Both seemed anchored by their family ties and showed no signs of wanting to disappear. There were no indications of financial trouble, mental health struggles, or relationship issues that might have explained a sudden vanishing act. One detail that has puzzled investigators and followers of the case was the condition of Lilly's car when it was found. While it was locked, the driver's seat was pushed farther back than Lilly, at 5'3", would have needed. This suggested that someone taller may have driven it last. There was no evidence of forced entry, meaning the keys had been used. but the keys were not found in or near the vehicle. Additionally, the car was parked neatly as if whoever left it there had intended for it not to draw attention. This deliberate placement only deepened the mystery. As police dug deeper, they reviewed surveillance footage from the area. Cameras from a nearby gas station showed what appeared to be Lilly's car passing by around 1:45 p.m. on the day of the disappearance, but the footage was too grainy to determine who was driving. What caught investigators' attention, however, was that another vehicle, a dark SUV, seemed to be following at a short distance. Attempts to identify that SUV have remained unsuccessful to this day. Witnesses in the area later reported seeing a young woman and a teenage boy walking along the trail where the car was found, but none could definitively say it was Lilly and Jack. Theories quickly began to swirl within the community. Some believed the siblings had been abducted, perhaps by someone they knew, given the lack of obvious signs of struggle. Others speculated that the presence of the SUV might indicate foul play, possibly human trafficking or an opportunistic crime that escalated unexpectedly. Still others suggested the possibility of a voluntary disappearance, though their family and friends vehemently rejected the idea. The case began to attract national media attention, and with it came public pressure on law enforcement to find answers. Press conferences were held where investigators urged anyone with information to come forward. A reward was offered and tip lines were flooded with calls. Some tips seemed credible, such as sightings of two individuals matching Lilly and Jack's descriptions in nearby towns, but none of these leads panned out. Others were more outlandish, including claims of paranormal involvement or elaborate conspiracy theories that often arise in high-profile unsolved cases. Months passed, and despite the tireless efforts of search teams and investigators, the trail went cold. The Sullivan family continued to plead for information, holding vigils and creating online communities dedicated to keeping Lilly and Jack's story alive. Their disappearance became one of those cases that haunted the public, both because of its tragic nature and because of the unsettling lack of evidence. Every missing persons case leaves behind a void of unanswered questions, but this one seemed to have been swallowed by silence. How could two siblings, together in broad daylight, vanish without leaving a single trace? The haunting nature of the case lies in its contradictions. On one hand, the evidence points to foul play: the abandoned car, the missing phones, the possible SUV tailing them. On the other hand, the absence of physical evidence at the scene makes it difficult to construct a clear timeline or suspect. Each discovery only seemed to raise more questions. Why were their belongings left behind? Who had the keys to Lilly's car? Why was Jack's phone turned off so abruptly? And if someone had abducted them, how had they managed to do so without leaving any trace? Part 1 of the story ends in the same place it began, with questions and heartache. The Sullivan family, along with investigators and the public, were left grappling with a chilling mystery that had no clear resolution. As the weeks turned into months and months into years, the case remained open, but progress seemed frozen in time. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan would become a wound on the fabric of the community, a reminder of how fragile and fleeting safety can be and how quickly ordinary lives can be shattered by the extraordinary. The days after the discovery of Lilly's abandoned Honda Civic became a blur of speculation and urgency. The search for the siblings intensified, but the absence of tangible clues made the case increasingly difficult. Investigators pressed forward, combing through every detail that could offer even a sliver of insight. One of their first priorities was the forensic examination of the car. Specialists dusted for prints, examined fibers, and swabbed for DNA, but the results proved underwhelming. Aside from prints belonging to Lilly and Jack, there were no unidentified samples that could be tied to a suspect. The interior of the car appeared almost too clean, as if wiped down. This sparked new concerns. Had someone meticulously removed evidence? If so, it suggested deliberate planning, not a random act. Meanwhile, police canvassed the area where the car was found, speaking to residents and hikers. A few locals reported noticing the gray sedan parked near the trail in the early evening, but no one had seen who left it there. One witness mentioned hearing what sounded like an argument in the woods, though they could not identify voices or pinpoint the time. That fragment of testimony was logged, but yielded no breakthrough. Another unsettling tip came from a delivery driver who claimed he saw two figures walking toward the tree line near the location hours earlier. He recalled one being taller, possibly a man, and the other shorter, perhaps a teenager. Though the description was vague, some wondered if it had been Lilly and Jack in their final known moments. As public awareness grew, police expanded their investigation to the siblings' personal lives. They scrutinized Lilly's phone records, social media, and recent communications. Friends described her as happy and grounded, though one revealed she had recently been exchanging messages with an older man online. The messages, which investigators later retrieved, were casual at first but increasingly hinted at the man wanting to meet in person. The identity behind the account was murky, with police tracing it back to a disposable phone and an unverified name. This fueled one line of inquiry. Had Lilly agreed to meet someone, with Jack tagging along, only for the encounter to take a dark turn? Jack's digital trail offered little. His phone had been abruptly switched off just after leaving home, a move unusual for a teenager who typically stayed connected. His school laptop, seized for analysis, revealed nothing suspicious beyond typical searches related to art and coursework. Some speculated that Jack had knowledge of Lilly's interactions online and may have accompanied her for safety, unaware of the danger they would both face. At this stage, the SUV seen trailing Lilly's car became central to the investigation. Law enforcement appealed to the public, releasing grainy stills from the gas station footage. Though the image quality was poor, the shape suggested it was either a dark-colored Chevrolet Tahoe or a similar model. The driver's identity has never been confirmed, but the unanswered question loomed: coincidence or predator? Calls poured in with sightings of dark SUVs, but none led to a definitive match. The Sullivan family remained vocal, appearing at press conferences and pleading directly to the public. The siblings' father, who lived in another part of the province, joined the search efforts and expressed frustration with the pace of the investigation. Community support surged, with volunteers organizing nightly vigils, distributing flyers, and maintaining a tireless presence on social media. Hashtags like #FindLillyandJack spread across Twitter and Facebook, ensuring the case remained visible. Despite these efforts, investigators struggled to identify concrete suspects. Rumors swirled that the siblings may have been victims of human trafficking, given the lack of evidence and the proximity to highways that could facilitate quick transport. Law enforcement acknowledged the theory, but emphasized there was no direct proof to support it. Others whispered about known offenders in the region. Police quietly investigated registered sex offenders in the surrounding counties, interviewing individuals and checking alibis. None, however, tied directly to the case. One curious twist arose when a tip suggested a possible connection to a series of attempted abductions in a nearby town weeks earlier. In those cases, young women reported being approached by a man in a dark SUV who tried to lure them into his vehicle. The suspect had never been caught, and descriptions were inconsistent. Investigators could not confirm a link, but the parallels were disturbing. If the same predator was behind both incidents, then the Sullivan siblings may have been unfortunate victims of an escalation. Months later, winter descended on Nova Scotia, blanketing the search areas in snow and ice. Efforts continued despite the elements, with cadaver dogs and search teams scouring frozen lakes and dense woods. Still, nothing surfaced. The Sullivan case began to drift toward becoming a cold case, though investigators insisted they remained active. For the family, however, every day without answers felt like another betrayal by time itself. Theories became the fuel of conversation both locally and online. True crime enthusiasts dissected every known detail, constructing elaborate possibilities. Some pointed to the possibility that the siblings had known their abductor. The locked vehicle, absence of forced entry, and missing keys suggested a level of trust. Had they willingly let someone drive them to that spot? Others entertained darker possibilities. Perhaps the SUV was not a stranger's vehicle but belonged to someone from their social circle. The lack of clarity only intensified the eerie weight of the case. The police attempted to reconstruct the siblings' final known timeline. They left home around noon. By 1:45 p.m., Lilly's car was captured near the gas station with the SUV following. Around 2:15 p.m., Lilly's phone pinged a tower near the trail before going silent. By 3 p.m., family members began unsuccessfully trying to reach her. The window of their disappearance was narrow, less than 3 hours, yet within that span they seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. Investigators also tried to follow the digital footprints of the mysterious online contact Lilly had been speaking with. Despite extensive efforts, the individual remained untraceable, hidden behind layers of anonymity. Some experts suggested the account may have been created specifically to target her, a chilling thought that pointed to premeditation. Without stronger evidence, however, the theory remained speculation. The more investigators dug, the more contradictions emerged. For example, some witnesses claimed they saw Lilly and Jack walking near the trail. If true, why leave behind their belongings in the car? And why had neither returned home or contacted anyone? Others suggested those witnesses had mistaken other individuals for the siblings, further muddying the waters. As the case dragged on, the Sullivan family faced the unbearable burden of limbo. Without answers, they could neither mourn nor find closure. Each day carried the faint hope of resolution, followed by crushing silence when none came. For them, life was permanently divided into two eras: before November 12, 2020, and after. As weeks bled into months and the trail grew colder, the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan took on a life of its own in the media. True crime podcasts dedicated entire episodes to the siblings, dissecting the limited facts and building speculative theories that ranged from plausible to bizarre. Local news outlets reported consistently, but soon national media descended on Nova Scotia, turning the quiet community into a stage for one of the most unsettling unsolved mysteries in Canada. For the Sullivan family, the attention was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the coverage kept the case in the public eye, ensuring it would not fade into obscurity. On the other, it created a relentless cycle of speculation that sometimes painted the family in an unfair light, with online commenters scrutinizing their every word and gesture in interviews. Investigators, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure. The public wanted answers, and the longer the case went unsolved, the more scrutiny fell on the police department itself. Were they missing something obvious? Had mistakes been made in the early stages of the search? Questions arose over whether the car should have been treated differently, whether the trail area had been properly secured, and whether crucial evidence had been overlooked in the rush of the first 48 hours. Behind closed doors, officers admitted the frustration was eating at them. Missing persons cases were already notoriously difficult, but this one felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. One path investigators pursued involved re-interviewing everyone connected to the siblings. Friends, classmates, co-workers, extended relatives. No one was overlooked. The goal was to identify potential conflicts or secrets that may have been hidden at first. But in every account, Lilly and Jack were described as grounded and close to family. There were no feuds, no debts, no unexplained behaviors. Lilly's one possible secret, the online contact with the mysterious older man, remained the strongest lead, but without digital footprints or personal identifiers, it felt like chasing a ghost. Experts in cybercrime pointed out that such anonymity could only be achieved by someone who knew how to cover their tracks, which hinted at sophistication rather than a random encounter. As time went on, alternative theories gained traction. Some believed the siblings had been lured away by someone they trusted. The lack of forced entry to the car and the careful way it was left suggested the involvement of an individual who wanted to minimize suspicion. If the siblings had willingly followed this person, perhaps to discuss something urgent or private, they might have walked directly into a trap. The SUV, always lurking at the edges of the narrative, only fueled suspicions that someone had orchestrated the entire sequence of events. Another line of speculation centered on the wooded area itself. Searchers had combed it extensively, but some believed the siblings may have been hidden in a way that avoided detection. Dense forests and rugged terrain made for challenging conditions, and it was possible that evidence remained buried or concealed. Cadaver dogs had been deployed, but their effectiveness depended on numerous variables, including weather and time. Every failed sweep added to the eerie aura of the case, as if the land itself refused to give up its secrets. The family continued to fight against despair, holding vigils and community walks to keep the story alive. Candlelight gatherings became a common sight in the town square, where friends, neighbors, and strangers came together to honor Lilly and Jack. Photographs of the siblings, Lilly smiling in a graduation cap, Jack with his sketchbook in hand, were printed on posters and t-shirts. Their mother spoke often of the empty silence in their home, of setting the table for dinner and being overwhelmed by the absence of laughter that once filled the kitchen. Each interview she gave was a plea for empathy and for action, her voice trembling yet resolute as she demanded answers. The police also began consulting with outside experts, including behavioral analysts who specialized in missing persons and abductions. These experts constructed possible offender profiles based on the available evidence. if the SUV belonged to the perpetrator. Analysts suggested the driver was likely organized and deliberate, someone who had perhaps stalked the siblings' movements beforehand. The way the car was parked indicated a desire for control, not chaos. The sudden shut-off of Jack's phone could imply that the perpetrator forced him to power it down or discarded it immediately to prevent tracking. All of these details pointed toward a calculated crime. Yet, without a suspect to attach these characteristics to, the profiles floated in a void of speculation. The case's chilling nature drew parallels to other unsolved disappearances across Canada and beyond. Some compared it to the case of the Springfield 3 in the United States, where 3 women vanished from a home in 1992 without leaving physical evidence behind. Others linked it to unsolved abduction cases in rural communities where isolation and limited surveillance made quick vanishings possible. These comparisons did little to comfort the Sullivan family but reinforced the idea that such disappearances, though rare, were devastatingly real. Online, amateur sleuths became heavily invested in the case. Forums and social media threads dissected every known fact, analyzing maps of the trail, timing of the phone pings, and distances between landmarks. Some users even conducted their own on-the-ground searches, hiking the woods in hopes of uncovering something the official teams had missed. While the passion was admirable, investigators worried that such efforts risked contaminating potential evidence. Nonetheless, the sheer volume of attention kept the case alive in the public imagination. Months stretched into a year, and anniversaries of the disappearance brought renewed coverage. On the first anniversary, the family organized a large memorial gathering, inviting the community to honor Lilly and Jack. Balloons were released into the sky, and speakers took turns sharing memories of the siblings. For the family, it was an attempt to transform grief into unity, but behind the smiles and embraces lay the unshakable torment of not knowing. Hope and despair lived side by side, each anniversary marking survival but also loss. Despite the passage of time, law enforcement maintained an active case file. Detectives pursued occasional tips, but most fizzled out. Some tips came from individuals who claimed to have seen the siblings in different provinces, raising the possibility of survival. But when followed up, each lead dissolved into misidentification or fabrication. The more time passed, the less likely survival seemed, but the absence of evidence left the door cracked open. Within the police department, the case began to embody frustration itself. Investigators spoke of sleepless nights and the gnawing sense of unfinished business. Some officers admitted that the Sullivan siblings were the first thought they had in the morning and the last thought they had before bed. Others struggled with the weight of expectations, knowing the family looked to them for answers they could not provide. Over time, reassignment of personnel and shifting priorities threatened to let the case drift into the abyss of cold cases. But public pressure ensured it never disappeared completely from the agenda. The Sullivan disappearance also began to impact the wider community. Parents became more cautious, warning their children about online contacts and emphasizing safety during outings. The once tranquil hiking trails carried an air of unease, with fewer visitors venturing into the woods. Stories of the siblings were whispered in classrooms and cafes, each retelling adding new layers of myth to the tragedy. The case became not only a mystery but a cautionary tale. In the midst of this, some cracks in public trust emerged. Conspiracy theories blossomed, fueled by the lack of answers. Some accused local authorities of covering up mistakes or withholding crucial evidence. Others speculated that influential individuals might be involved, shielding suspects from scrutiny. While these theories lacked hard proof, they thrived in the absence of resolution. For the Sullivan family, navigating these narratives added yet another burden as they sought to separate fact from fiction in their pursuit of truth. By the second year of the investigation, hope for a breakthrough hinged on advancements in technology and persistence. Investigators began revisiting the SUV lead with new tools, using enhanced image processing on the original footage. While the results remained inconclusive, some analysts claimed the SUV may have had a distinctive roof rack, narrowing the possible models. Police also re-examined digital evidence, applying updated forensic software in hopes of uncovering new clues in the siblings' devices. These efforts reflected the determination to squeeze every ounce of possibility from the available evidence. For the Sullivan family, the waiting was its own form of torment. Each day was a balancing act between hope and despair, between believing their children might still be alive and fearing the worst. Their mother described dreams where Lilly and Jack returned home, only to wake to the crushing reality of their absence. Their father confessed to carrying guilt, wondering if he could have done more to protect them. Such emotions weighed heavily, yet they refused to give up the search. The family's persistence became a symbol of resilience, admired by many who followed their story. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan became not only a crime but a symbol of the unknown. It embodied the fragility of normalcy, the terrifying notion that two lives could vanish in the span of an afternoon without explanation. Each unanswered question lingered like a shadow. Who drove the SUV? Who last held the keys to Lily's car? Why were the siblings' belongings left behind, but not their phones? And above all, where were Lilly and Jack? As the third year after Lilly and Jack Sullivan's disappearance began, the case had firmly cemented itself as one of the most haunting cold cases in Nova Scotia. For investigators, the absence of closure was a constant wound, reopened with every new tip that came in, promising hope and then collapsing under scrutiny. For the family, it was a relentless ache that time did not soothe. Anniversaries became heavier, not lighter. Birthdays that should have been milestones, Jack's 18th, Lily's 25th, passed in silence, marked by memorial candles and empty chairs. Their absence remained a presence in the household, an unyielding shadow that no amount of distraction could erase. But just when the silence seemed permanent, small sparks would appear, sudden and almost cruel in the way they reignited hope. In one instance, a tip came in from a truck driver who claimed he had given a ride to two young people matching the siblings' descriptions in rural New Brunswick. He described the young woman as nervous, glancing over her shoulder often, while the young man remained mostly quiet with a sketchbook on his lap. The driver had not known about the case until much later, when he saw their photos on a missing persons poster. Investigators scrambled to verify the story, checking the trucker's route and cross-referencing any possible surveillance along the highway, but the lead dissolved quickly. No cameras had captured the encounter, no one else corroborated it, and while the driver seemed sincere, memory was fickle. The family clung to it for weeks before the weight of uncertainty returned. Another lead came from a woman in Quebec, who insisted she had seen Lilly in a convenience store late at night. According to her account, Lilly appeared disoriented, accompanied by a man who guided her by the elbow. Police checked the store's security footage, and while it did capture a young woman with passing resemblance to Lilly, the differences were enough to rule her out. The woman's height, clothing, and features didn't match closely enough, though to the desperate Sullivan family it was hard not to see echoes of their missing daughter. Each near miss was a twist of the knife, the promise of answers followed by another dead end. Theories about the disappearance also evolved as time passed. Some criminologists who studied the case began to emphasize the likelihood of premeditation. The way the siblings' belongings were left behind in the car, the deliberate parking, the absence of the keys all pointed to an offender who wanted to erase their tracks. The SUV following Lily's car was seen less as coincidence and more as a calculated maneuver. Experts suggested the driver may have surveilled the siblings beforehand, waiting for the right opportunity. Such crimes, they explained, often involved offenders who found psychological satisfaction in control and secrecy. The locked car and missing keys were a form of control, stripping the victims of agency while leaving just enough confusion to confound investigators. Other experts highlighted the psychological torment inflicted on families in unsolved cases. Without answers, the Sullivan family lived in a state known as ambiguous loss, a form of grief where closure is impossible because the fate of the loved one remains unknown. This type of grief is often described as harder to bear than death itself, because it offers no finality. The family oscillated daily between hope and despair, clinging to the possibility of survival even as logic whispered darker conclusions. Their mother once told reporters that she prayed for answers even if they were tragic, because the not knowing was unbearable. She described walking past Lily's room and being overwhelmed by the scent of her perfume still lingering on old clothes, or finding one of Jack's sketches tucked inside a book and feeling crushed by the sudden reminder of what was missing. Despite the case's stagnation, the family refused to let the public forget. They launched a dedicated website, Find Lilly and Jack, which compiled updates, timelines, and appeals for information. They held annual walks through the very trail where the car had been discovered, each one drawing hundreds of supporters. They'd partnered with advocacy groups focused on missing persons, pushing for changes in how cases were handled, particularly when digital evidence was involved. Their persistence kept the story alive, ensuring that even as new tragedies unfolded across the country, the names Lilly and Jack Sullivan would not fade into obscurity. Media coverage followed a similar pattern of resurgence. Whenever a new documentary or podcast highlighted the case, public attention surged again. One popular Canadian true crime series dedicated an hour-long episode to the siblings' disappearance, interviewing family, investigators, and forensic experts. The program revisited the SUV footage, enhancing it with the latest technology, though still no license plate could be extracted. The episode reignited debates, especially online, where forums buzzed with speculation about the identity of the driver. Some amateur sleuths insisted the SUV must have belonged to someone in the community who had evaded suspicion. Others theorized it was a passing stranger, perhaps a trucker or drifter, whose anonymity made them nearly impossible to track. The family, though grateful for the coverage, also grew weary of the cycle. Each burst of public interest came with a fresh wave of theories and, worse, accusations. Online trolls targeted the family with cruel comments, suggesting they knew more than they admitted. Such cruelty is not uncommon in high-profile unsolved cases, but it was devastating nonetheless. The family had lost their children and now had to endure suspicion and vitriol from strangers hiding behind screens. Their resilience was tested daily, but they persevered, guided by the belief that truth would one day emerge. Investigators, too, faced unrelenting frustration. Over the years, they had followed hundreds of leads, interviewed dozens of potential witnesses, and sifted through thousands of tips. Yet the case remained stubbornly unsolved. Some officers privately admitted they feared the siblings would never be found, their fate joining the grim catalog of cold cases that defy resolution. Others held on to hope that one overlooked clue might eventually crack the case. The advancement of technology offered one glimmer of possibility. With every passing year, forensic methods improved. DNA analysis became more precise, digital tracing grew more sophisticated, and artificial intelligence offered new ways to enhance surveillance footage. Detectives clung to the hope that a future breakthrough in technology might uncover what current methods could not. Even as investigators struggled, the community continued to honor Lilly and Jack. Their high school created scholarships in their names, awarded to students who embodied Jack's creativity or Lilly's warmth. Friends and neighbors planted trees in their memory, hoping that even if the siblings never returned, their legacy would grow. These acts of remembrance were bittersweet, offering solace but underscoring the absence that inspired them. Theories, of course, never ceased. Some insisted the siblings had been abducted by someone with a personal connection, perhaps a jilted admirer or an acquaintance with hidden motives. Others leaned toward the idea of a stranger abduction, rare but not impossible, given the mysterious SUV. A few entertained the idea that the siblings might have left voluntarily, starting a new life elsewhere. But those who knew them dismissed this quickly. Lilly was deeply connected to her friends and had been excited about her future. Jack, though quiet, was dedicated to his family and his art. Running away simply did not align with who they were. Psychologists who studied the case emphasized how abductions often exploit moments of vulnerability. Perhaps Lilly had agreed to meet her online contact, believing it was safe with Jack by her side. Perhaps the perpetrator manipulated that trust to lure them into isolation. Once cut off from the world, phones disabled, car keys taken, they were at the mercy of someone who thrived on control. The chilling efficiency of the crime suggested a predator who knew what they were doing, someone who had likely fantasized about or even attempted such acts before. If true, it raised the terrifying possibility that this person had struck again, unnoticed, in another community. Years later, the Sullivan case remained open but stagnant. It lived in the liminal space between memory and myth, a story retold in whispers and news specials, in online forums and candlelit vigils. For the family, the pain was raw as ever. For investigators, it was a reminder of the limits of human knowledge. And for the public, it became a parable of fragility, the sobering truth that even in the ordinary rhythm of daily life, disappearance and devastation can strike without warning. Every detail remained etched in the narrative, haunting in its incompleteness. The locked car, parked so deliberately. The belongings left behind. The missing keys. The SUV shadowing them in the daylight. The phones that went silent, leaving nothing but an empty digital void. Each piece suggested intention, but none revealed resolution. And so the story of Lilly and Jack Sullivan continued, unsolved, lingering in the collective imagination like a wound that refused to heal. The story of Lilly and Jack Sullivan's disappearance does not end neatly, nor does it provide the comfort of resolution. It continues to stretch across the years like an unfinished sentence, a haunting reminder of how fragile certainty truly is. Every cold case carries with it an ache, but the absence of answers in this one feels especially heavy because it involves not one but two lives swallowed by mystery. To this day, the disappearance of the siblings remains a puzzle unsolved, each detail echoing with questions that no one has been able to answer. For the Sullivan family, life after November 12, 2020, has been defined by an endless search for truth. Their mother, whose voice trembled in those first desperate press conferences, learned over time how to transform grief into determination. She became a relentless advocate not just for Lilly and Jack but for all missing persons, speaking at conferences, working with advocacy groups, and lobbying for improvements in how digital leads are handled by law enforcement. She often said that while she longed for closure, she also hoped that the tragedy of her children could inspire change that might prevent other families from enduring the same torment. Jack and Lily's father, though quieter, carried his grief in quieter but no less profound ways. He kept photographs of them framed in his home, spoke often of Jack's passion for art and Lily's love of working with children, and refused to let their memory be overshadowed by the circumstances of their disappearance. His interviews often contained fewer words than their mother's, but each sentence carried the weight of someone who had lost pieces of himself the day they vanished. The community, too, adapted in its own way. For years after, the hiking trail where the car was found remained a symbol of unease. Some avoided it entirely, while others visited it deliberately, leaving flowers and notes as acts of remembrance. The once ordinary path through the woods became a place where the air felt heavier, as if infused with the unresolved. Community events in their honor continued each year: memorial walks, candlelit vigils, art exhibits showcasing Jack's sketches, and scholarships under Lily's name. These traditions preserved the siblings' presence even in absence, ensuring their lives were celebrated as much as their disappearance was mourned. The case itself remained under active investigation, though progress was incremental. Occasionally, the police would announce that they were following up on new tips or reanalyzing evidence with updated technology. Each announcement brought a wave of anticipation, only for silence to follow when no new revelations emerged. Detectives who had worked the case from the beginning often admitted it was one of the most perplexing files of their careers, one that gnawed at them long after they clocked out of the office. Some retired still carrying the weight of it, hoping that the next generation of investigators might succeed where they had not. In the broader world of true crime and public imagination, the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan became something larger than itself. It was dissected in documentaries, debated in podcasts, and analyzed in online forums where amateur sleuths mapped theories on virtual boards. Theories became their own form of folklore. The mysterious SUV belonging to a stranger who stalked them, the possibility of a trusted acquaintance betraying them, the haunting idea that they may have stumbled into something larger: organized crime, human trafficking, or a predator who had rehearsed this moment. Each theory felt plausible in its own way, yet none could be proven, leaving the story suspended in uncertainty. Some analysts suggested that the siblings' disappearance was a case study in how quickly ordinary life can unravel. Their story reinforced the importance of the first 48 hours in missing persons investigations, the critical window where small oversights can make the difference between resolution and mystery. Others viewed it as an indictment of how unprepared society still is for cases that involve digital anonymity, how an online contact with no traceable identity can manipulate trust and vanish without a footprint. Whatever the interpretation, the Sullivan case became a mirror reflecting the vulnerabilities of modern life. For the family, however, the theories meant little without proof. They longed not for speculation, but for facts, something tangible that could explain what had happened. Their mother often spoke of the cruel irony that the world could feel so small in the age of technology. Yet their children had still managed to vanish without a trace. She described each day as a balancing act between holding on to hope and bracing for the possibility of grief's final blow. Hope whispered that Lilly and Jack were still out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Grief warned that silence this long rarely ended with survival. The psychological toll of ambiguous loss never eased. Every phone call carried the potential to be the one that changed everything. Every knock at the door brought a flicker of fear and hope. Holidays became both sacred and excruciating, marked by empty chairs and whispered prayers. Their birthdays were celebrated with cakes and candles, but each flame carried the weight of a wish unfulfilled. Time did not heal. It only deepened the strangeness of absence. In the community, the Sullivan siblings became symbols of innocence stolen. Teachers remembered them in classrooms, friends recalled their laughter and quiet conversations, and even strangers felt compelled to share their story. Their names became shorthand for vulnerability, and their faces became reminders of how quickly safety can dissolve. When new families moved to the area, they were told the story of Lilly and Jack as part of the community's identity and unspoken warning, a shared grief that bound neighbors together. In the absence of answers, the case also took on a haunting allure that captivated outsiders. Documentaries revisited it years later, portraying the siblings as smiling faces frozen in time, their story narrated with somber tones and ominous music. Each retelling brought the case to new audiences, some of whom became invested enough to launch independent investigations of their own. Yet no matter how many times the story was told, the conclusion remained the same. Lilly and Jack Sullivan were gone, their fate unknown, their disappearance unresolved. Even now, the case remains a scar on the landscape of Nova Scotia. The trail where their car was found is still walked by hikers, some unaware of the tragedy, others drawn there precisely because of it. The site has become both a place of remembrance and a source of unease, its ordinary beauty forever shadowed by the extraordinary mystery it harbors. Visitors often report a heaviness in the air, as if the land itself remembers what it will not reveal. And so the mystery lingers. Every detail remains etched in the narrative like pieces of a puzzle that refuses to be solved. The locked car, parked with care. The belongings left inside. The missing keys vanishing as cleanly as the siblings themselves. The SUV caught on grainy footage, a phantom that haunts the timeline. The phones that went silent, leaving investigators with digital silence where once there was connection. Each detail hints at intention, but none offers closure. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan stands as a testament to the chilling truth that not every story finds its ending. It is a story about family, love, and loss, but also about mystery, absence, and the enduring search for answers. It teaches us that even in an age of technology and constant surveillance, people can still vanish. It reminds us that communities can rally, but closure does not always come. And it compels us to remember that behind every unsolved case are not just names and headlines, but lives that once burned brightly and families who continue to carry the weight of unanswered questions. Years may pass, but the story of Lilly and Jack Sullivan remains alive, whispered in households, remembered in vigils, and discussed in forums across the world. Perhaps one day technology, persistence, or sheer chance will uncover the missing piece. Until then, their story remains unfinished, suspended in the space between hope and despair. For now, it is a mystery without an ending. A reminder that sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones that never close.